All right, guys. We'll get cracking. Welcome, coming in. All right. Ko te waka, rere rangi o te Pākehā te waka. Ko rangitoto te maonga. Ko te moana nui a kiwa te moana. Ko Waikato toko awa. No Afrika ki te tonga. Ko Tony toko hua rangitira. Ko Emily taku ko tiro iti. Ko Brendan Austin toko ingoa. Welcome everybody. Just before we start, I just put this up just as a short reflection for you just to have a look at and think about in terms of your teaching practices and what's, I guess, going on within your classes, within your departments and schools. Just like a note before I start, this is not a solution to solving issues at all. It's not going to guarantee. It's not like something you can take away now and have 100% success in your classes or your students. It's something that we're trialing out, that we've been working on for a couple of years. Myself, Amy and Hayden in my department, and formerly Jeff, all really feel quite strongly about it, and we're working quite passionately on it. Hopefully you get some good ideas out of it. If not, hopefully you can find something good at least. So, yeah, welcome. I presented a couple of years ago on pretty much a very similar topic, and when the whole idea around embracing uncertainty came up, I sort of thought it fits in really well with the conference theme. I'm going to kind of unpack a little bit of that now. When it first popped out, I kind of looked at the conference theme about embracing uncertainty and was sort of wondering, what does it mean to embrace uncertainty? Like, the whole uncertain, not knowing what's happening, and that can be quite a daunting thing, and some people don't quite enjoy that. So to embrace it to me seemed a little bit weird, not knowing what's going on. But just really quickly, what does embracing uncertainty mean for you guys in here? Any ideas or any thoughts?
Feeling the fear.
Cool. So being comfortable, not being comfortable. Yep.
Feeling the fear and doing it anyway.
Feeling fear and doing it anyway. Sorry? Yeah, so being okay with not being that, yeah? Sweet. Cool. And what about the second question then? So like, if we just talked about those ideas in terms of what it means, like do we need a certain set of skills or characteristics or attributes to be able to, I guess, thrive in those situations? So like, for example, COVID and not knowing when your next lockdown is going to be in, or not knowing what's going to happen tomorrow or the next day or the next year. Do we need skills or attributes or characteristics? What do we need? So you need flexibility, patience, agility, problem solving, be adaptable. Cool, optimistic. Nice. So those are, I guess, quite key skills then when we think about things that you probably need to be able to embrace uncertainty, to be able to, I guess, to thrive in situations where you don't know what's happening or what the future's going to hold. To me personally, I can align with pretty much what most of you guys have said. And so when I think about, like, for example, COVID and lockdowns and uncertainty, for me, content knowledge is not really going to get me through that. But the skills that you guys have mentioned about being adaptable, about being resilient, are things that align with me more strongly. And things that, as a person, I want to develop, not only with myself and my daughter, but also within my students as well. Anybody heard of the World Economic Forum? They published quite a lot of cool stuff. And a couple of years ago, they released some stuff in terms of skills that are required for 21st century. And so they released a lot of stuff that talks about what do we need going into the future? Because there's a lot of discussion that you hear about, they talk about, our students are going into jobs that have not been created yet, perhaps. And so there's uncertainty around what those careers could look like, where they could be in a couple of years' time. And the list actually significantly shifted. This is an updated one, but it used to have things like content knowledge and stuff like that ranked up highly in terms of some of the top things that people were requiring. and more recently over the last couple of years, they've started to shift away to things like problem solving, critical thinking, leadership, influence, technology use. Resilience comes into there as well, reasoning, problem solving, ideation. So we're kind of seeing a shift in terms of what are the things that students are probably going to need to be able to thrive in the future, whatever their career pathway is or whatever they need. In there's nothing that says content knowledge. So being able to, I always have a dig at it, being able to recite the first 20 elements on the periodic table is probably not going to get you through COVID. All right. However, resilience is being able to problem solve. Okay, so I'm in this situation now. What can I do to help myself move through? So this is kind of the approach I'm going to take in terms of talking more about developing the skills in our students rather than making sure that they can recall all the content. So, obviously, learning agency is something that is discussed in New Zealand curriculum as well. There's a couple of comments that talk about students feeling in control when things happen. It also talks a little bit about being active participants in their learning. So if we're giving kids the skills and giving them opportunities to actually participate in their learning, have an involvement, create it, go and actually search for things and put things together and understand it, then that's kind of the key thing for me over here. Now, before I kind of get into what we've been doing and how we've been doing it, we've been working on it over a couple of years. We started kind of back in 2017 when we thought, well, we need to develop some literacy to support our students as well. We can't just say, go and find the stuff and write about it. You need to be able to have some support to be able to write and express yourself. So we looked at developing some literacy work. And in 2018, we came up with a little bit of a unit of work called the OAC Numbers Behind Performance. And we had our entire Year 11 cohort. It's roughly about 230 students there. And they did a maths and PE collaboration. And then we moved from there, 2019, 20, and 21, into developing our inquiry frameworks. So it's been quite a long process developing things, pieces of the puzzle, so that we can obviously keep building in the future. And I'm going to be talking more about the stuff over here and what we've been doing and how we've been doing it. So, where I come from and where Hayden, Amy, and I teach at the moment, we teach at Ormiston Senior College, so based in South Auckland. Currently, we've got a roll of about maybe 850 students. And listening to the keynote speaker on the first day when he talked about they've got 350 students lined up for next year, we're sitting in a very similar boat. So we're at years 11, 12, and 13 only. And we have feeder schools in Ormiston Junior College and Ormiston Primary. So there's 3 campuses right next to each other. It is a significantly growing area, very multicultural in terms of lots of different families arriving from different countries, places around the world, into that South Auckland Flatbush area. And prediction is that they want 7,000 kids amongst those 3 campuses in the next few years, and 3,000 within ours, which is insane. So a couple of years ago, we had a massive discussion about NCEA Level 1, and we talked a little bit about the value of NCEA Level 1, and when a student gains it, what can they actually do with it? Where can they go? And there wasn't really a whole lot that students could do with NCEA Level 1. They were just kind of being exposed to 5 courses, 5 assessments. They're doing 25 standards throughout the entire year, truckloads of assessments, and that. So we looked at it and we talked about, obviously, that over-assessment. We looked at students' well-being, and we decided that as a school, we're going to shift away from NCEA Level 1. We're going to take a Level 2 approach, so over 2 years, students can work towards NCEA Level 2, so Year 11s and Year 12. They still had to gain their 10 literacy and numeracy credits at Level 1 as part of, obviously, the current framework. But other than that, the kids did maths and English full-time throughout the year. And then they had a choice to choose, they had an option to choose 8 other courses. So English and maths, 4 courses in the first semester, and then they switched and did 4 different courses in the second. So they were getting a massive exposure to all learning areas. They weren't specializing in 3 sciences, English and maths in Year 11, and they were lost to that for the next 3 years. So kids could actually find a course that they maybe didn't even know about, which is relevant to their learning area. So supporting in terms of the ability to choose courses and getting exposure to a wider range of things. Other than that, the focus is on deeper learning. So what we were looking at is within the semester, term 1 and term 2 is semester 1, and term 3 and term 4 is semester 2. The students had the chance to actually go in more depth with their learning, and there is no explicit focus on the kids having to leave with a level 2 standard. The focus is on deeper learning and getting them ready to walk into your level 2 course to have success. If at some point the students produce some absolutely amazing work over the 2 terms and it aligns with something, cool. We'll assess them, we'll enter them in. They move on, obviously, to the next year with those credits in the bank. If not, they've got an awesome portfolio of evidence. If they do level 2P, they can fall back on and make some changes and continue building on that. The other thing I just want to emphasize is that within our courses, I think I mentioned the NTA assessment maybe twice in my first semester course, and that was right at the end of the year, at the end of the semester, so a couple of weeks ago, where my students were putting their evidence together, and one student said to me, "Oh, sir, how many credits is this for?" And I said, "Well, it's really up to you in terms of the work you produce. If it aligns with the standard, I'll mark it at that standard, and you can pick up those credits." So there wasn't a focus when they came in. There wasn't, "All right, you guys are working on 2.2 or 2.3. This is what you have to do." But I want you to be able to show me what you've learnt over the 2 terms and how have you applied that to your context and why. And I'm going to unpack a little bit more about that process shortly. So we shifted and we moved our program into kind of initially 2 areas. We actually, in the 10 years that the school's been going, we've only just had health the last 2 years. So that was a really, really big battle as well, pushing for health as well. But we finally got it. But we initially started with just physical education, and we had like a really, really big decision to make in terms of what we did. Did we have one PE course, or did we try and create pathways for kids that were more relevant to them and more interesting? So we split it into what we call PHM and PHS. And so PHM was the sports science like approach, moves to improve. So any students that were really passionate about performance and sports science aspects could follow that pathway. And then we had a couple other kids that loved physical education but just weren't quite into that sports science. They probably were looking at like event management or leadership, different aspects like that. So we created a PHS sociology pathway, which looks at like physical activity issues in physical education, and some of the things that could fit under that. For example, we looked at gender equality in sports. Amy looked at racism in sport, I think, this last semester. We've done a number of projects with the local primary school. We've had our kids actually delivering PE lessons to them, because we kind of all know that primary physical education is not as good as what it could be, just obviously for a number of reasons. So we looked at that as well, and our students have gone and developed and run PE sessions with the primary schools. So it's all about creating those opportunities as well. And then last year we had PEHT, which is health, and we called it like Tamatu Tamaora, which means to stand up and take action for health. So the focus was around improving well-being. And so what can you do to enhance the well-being of yourself, other people within your school, your community? So those were the pathways that our Year 11 kids can now take currently at the moment.
Sorry, can they take multiple of those? Could they take PEHM and semester 1 and PEHS in semester 2?
Yep, 100%, yep. I mean, they could even do PHM in 1 and 2 if they wanted to. It really is up to them. But yeah, they can do all 3.
And then did you have any prereqs on what they had to have done in Year 11 for Year 12?
No.
So they didn't have to done any of them?
No, because according to, I think it's NZQA, there's actually not really any prereqs for any courses. Yeah. So that's one of the things as well, is there's no prereqs actually for any course. If you want to do a course, you can do it. However, you just need to understand that you might not have as much success. But yeah, we haven't had any prereqs, so we'll have kids potentially jumping into level 2. But I can't, off the top of my head, think of very many at all. We generally have them doing at least one of those. And in some cases, they might be doing all 3. Cool. So the process, so what have we done? So a couple of years ago when we were working on this project at the end of the year, when we visited Rotatuna, we visited Hobsonville Points, Went to Albany Secondary High School as well, so different places like that, and we actually had a look at what they were doing as well, different projects, different ideas, and we came back with this idea that we wanted to kind of create an inquiry-based or a project-based course where kids could inquire into things that they were passionate and interested about, and they could work on themselves. So we took ideas from different areas like that. We also worked with Ormiston Junior College, and my ex-colleague Jeff Greenwood's wife actually works at Ormiston Junior, and she's really a guru around inquiry learning. And so we sort of did a fair bit of work with her, and also looked at our school norms. So we have 8 norms in our school, like our norms, our values, that we sort of try and push with the students as well. And we try to work that all together into an inquiry, a guided inquiry framework, not just a free-for-all. So it was quite guided in terms of what students could do. When we started on that as well, there was a little bit of stuff done by Claire Amos talking about student agency and developing student agency. And so one of those things was do students have access to a learning platform 24 hours a day? Like, where can they access content from? And is it accessible? So we went about creating like a learning hub. All right, so we've got a physical education learning hub and a health one. And on there, our levels 1, 2, and 3 students, or year 11, 12, and 13 can all access that. And within those, they actually have resources for most of the stuff that students will be covering. And we're constantly just building and upgrading that as we go every year, every semester, to add new content for topics that potentially that we may not have covered. I'll show you a little bit about that in a bit. So from there, in the first couple of weeks of each of the courses, we look at running provocations with students. So the idea is to try and provoke kids to get them thinking a little bit about, for example, PEHM moves to improve what areas of your performance do you want to improve on. And so the kids end up getting into a whole bunch of different provocations and ideas or opportunities in the first couple of weeks where they can just participate. And so as an example, I'll just skip forward a couple really quickly. Over here on the left-hand side, this is what I did with my class this semester. At the start of the year, I just did a little bit of work on lawn bowls, agility run, tennis, frisbee golf, volleyball, badminton, basketball, agility run, vertical jump, and prone hold. Just as a couple of different provocations, just to get kids to look at different areas of performance and expose them to other areas as well and see what their interests in. And so from there, they wrote down a couple things that they noticed or they enjoyed or didn't enjoy or thought they could maybe look at improving. Once they've done that, they sort of ranked them on a 1 to 10 or 1 to 12 scale in terms of what they enjoyed the most and least. And they moved into a little thing over here called the good old 3, 2, 1. So you've got 3 things, your top 3 ideas. All right, so out of those top 3, I want you to cross out one that's not as strong as the other 2. And then they have 2 left. Out of those 2, once again, have a look at them, cross out one more, and they get left with 1. And this particular student was looking at badminton and looking at her ability to receive a serve as an idea. So she wanted to build on that as her project. So that was kind of how we, I guess, moved through and how we ended up creating it. So from here, the students create a little I wonder statement. So on our template, once they've explored their ideas, they create an I wonder statement. So I wonder how I can improve my vertical jump for basketball, to defend basketball, or I wonder how I can improve my overhead clear shot in badminton, etc. So they come up with a bit of a SMART goal, or like an I wonder statement, and that's where they kind of move to the next things and the next steps. Part of that now is once they had that I wonder statement, we sort of say to students, all right, so if your work is on badminton, what things do you think you need to improve on? Or what could you use to help you improve your badminton overhead clear shot, as an example? And the students go through and they come up with a little bit of a learning list of things that potentially they could learn that could support them with that. So this particular student looked at reaction time, agility, stability, coordination, strength. So she was dipping into different areas of the biophysical principles. All right, so it wasn't just like, all right, you can only do methods of training, or you can only do biomechanical principles. It's now getting them to actually look at all the different areas and choose things that are more relevant to them. Once they've created that learning list, we then sort of structured it that the students could then go through and access the learning pages where the content for most that would be, and plan their weeks out. So they would go through and they would plan out what they're doing this week. So this week I'm going to focus on looking at reaction time and agility. And so they would go and find some reaction time drills, training things. They might go find some agility drills, and they would plan their session out. So you're probably thinking, how the heck would you do that when you've got 25 to 30 kids? It is quite difficult, and this is where kind of embracing the not knowing and being able to kind of step back and hand over the reins to students comes in, because it's starting to develop their ability to plan for themselves and to manage themselves. So rather than me saying, all right guys, we're all doing projectile motion today as a class, we're all learning about that. However, projectile motion doesn't work for you because you don't need projectile motion for something. Each student's working on their own projects and their own content for the sessions. All right, and so what we would do is have the students plan it out at the start of the week. What are they doing in their 3 sessions? We have 2 60s and a 90. All right, one of those is allocated towards them researching, and that's probably one of the first sessions of the week. So the students, if they're looking at reaction time, they're going to research, what is reaction time? How can I improve it? What are some things that I can do? And they almost create their lesson plans for themselves. And then from there, as a teacher, I'm free to go around and facilitate and talk to students about reaction time or projectile motion or different things about their projects. All right. What that look like in a practical session is quite interesting. You've got, kids, we're lucky enough, we've got a fitness centre and we can see down to the gym. So we've got kids working on vertical jump with weighted vests in the fitness centre, and downstairs we've got a volleyball court, we've got a badminton net, we've got basketball or shooting, and we've got some agility runs and different things going on. So it's about then, I guess, your teacher movement and moving around to each of the students' groups and having this conversation. So what's the focus for today? This is the focus. So can you tell me about it? Why is it going to help you to improve? What are you doing? How is it going to help you to improve? So the kids are taking what they've learned in that theory session earlier in the week and are starting to kind of do it in a practical setting. So they're applying it, what does it look like, and they might go do some serving for volleyball, and they're focusing on projectile motion and looking at the height, angles, and speeds of release, etc. So this is just a couple of other examples as well. The learning list, we have the same thing in health as well. Students have their inquiry topics as well. They go through the same provocations, they come up with their ideas, then they create a learning list. All right, so if their issues are around mental health, they come up with a list of things that they want to learn about that's got to do with mental health. All right, so all specific in terms of what the students are doing. Here's just a little bit of an example. We're picking this apart constantly and talking about better ways to do it, and there is always better ways to do this in terms of student planning. This is just a little bit of an example of one of my courses in terms of how the students have been planning. So we had sort of week 8, 9, 10, and they had a bit of a focus for the week, and then they could narrow it down more specifically. And this is one of the things that we're looking at as to how we can do this better. Whether we use a Google form and we have session 1, 2, and 3, and the kids just do that, and they put their plan into the Google form, which gets collected onto a spreadsheet. And then as a teacher, I can follow that and track that. So that's just one of the things that I'll talk about at the end in terms of considerations. So, learning evidence. As a result, I guess, of students working on their projects, they're collecting stuff throughout the entire 2 terms. They're not getting to the end of the 2 terms and then going, I now need to do all this stuff and apply this together. When they go from their learn about projectile motion for the volleyball serve, they're actually writing about how and why it applies. So what have they done for the session? How has it helped them to improve, etc. So they're reflecting throughout on the actual skills that they're doing or their topics. So when they get to the end of the semester, it's not a mad rush for students, or hopefully it's not, for them to go and have to create things. It's an opportunity for them just to go, I've got some stuff there, and pulling stuff together and presenting it to us however they want. This is an example of a project that some students have done in health this last semester, just around, I guess, a little bit on culture and image, and students kind of seeing their own cultures. And then on the left-hand side is just an example of a Google site that some of my health kids have done as part of their project Unfortunately, it's a little bit hard. I'll jump off this shortly and scroll through and show you guys towards the end a couple of kids' sites so you can see just what they look like. It's really difficult on a PowerPoint, unfortunately. Once again, like the evidence that the kids produce, once again, it's up to them. How they do it, this is a template that they could have used. So some just turned in their work like that. Others used Google Sites as well. We've had videos as well, and like previously, students have done work on video editing software. They can handwrite it if they want to. Doesn't matter. As long as at the end of it, they can collect all that evidence together and show us what they've learnt. That's awesome. All right. With this piece of work now, so what we've done is we don't assess it against the level 2 standard straight away. We'll have a look at it, and what we do is for our students, we talk about them working towards level 7 of the curriculum. So specifically, most people would kind of be like, no, well, we need to assess them at a year 11 level. The ideas that I've got for our particular course is that I want them to be able to walk into a level 2 PE course. So what I'm going to report back on you guys at the end of the semester is, where are you sitting in terms of working at that level 2 area of the curriculum in terms of the AOs? And so are they still working towards it? Are they working at? And then in terms of their work, if it doesn't meet a criteria, like for example, if a student's done some work on plyometrics, force summation and goal setting, and it doesn't quite fit into 2.2 and it doesn't fit into 2.3 or something like that, then we'll give them feedback on that and talk to them a little bit about their project, and then they'll be able to keep that. And if they come into PE2 next year, they've got a project that they could just kick off with and finish it up and turn it in. Unfortunately, those standards are quite specific as well, so we didn't want to be like, you have to have 2 biomechanical principles or you have to do this. I wanted kids to be able to look at a number of areas, and hopefully by the looks of the new changes, I'm hoping it's going to go that way, which would be really, really helpful. So here's just a couple other examples of some of the work. That's a photo of the kids and the local primary school, Ormiston Primary, doing some activities. In the middle's some of Hayden's class a couple of weeks back. They created, and we've never had a booking system for students to book in with the counsellor at our school. So it was always a bit of a logistical nightmare for her to manage all that. So part of Hayden's health class, they actually created, using Wix, was it Wix? Using Wix, a booking system for the school counsellor to support students within Ormiston Senior College to get access to see the counsellor. And they presented that to the staff a couple of weeks ago, which was pretty awesome. And then on the right side is Charlie and Phoenix, and that was another health project. The kids looked at the power of pets and mental health. And so we had my 2 retrievers at school for a couple of hours, just cruising around, and the kids could meet them, play with them, do whatever they want, sort of thing, in terms of looking at mental health as part of their project. So the projects and the ideas are really cool. There's some really fantastic things that come out of it. And students are having to do, they're having to collaborate with other people. So they're working with other people. And when you're going to get into, jobs where you're getting an issue proposed to you or a problem, you don't necessarily just work with yourself. You engage with other people to come up with a solution. And so the students are developing those skills around creativity, problem solving, looking critically at issues and thinking about how they can solve it, so that the focus for us is more on the development of those skills. So that when they get into level 2 health or level 2 P, level 3, they can fall back on those skills and use those skills, because you can access content at your fingertips now. You don't need to be able to recall significant amount of content. If you have the skills and ability to do that, I feel like you're better placed to be able to have success if you have the skills. So, just really quickly, this is a little bit of a survey I did at the end of the semester, just on what the students have thoughts at the moment, because part of student voice as well is obviously giving them an opportunity to have a little bit of voice and to speak and to share their thoughts, but then to listen to it and to take it into consideration and to make the change. And I think it's important that students see that as well, that they're not sharing stuff and then nothing's happening. because that's where you lose the student's voice. So part of our student voice, and that is next week. They don't know this yet, a department day, to catch up and to make a few changes to our program and to discuss that student voice and what we found's worked and what's not worked, and to improve on that for our second semester students. But I mean, the generic theme, like in terms of students enjoying the flexibility, getting to work with different people, picking their own topics and not being forced into doing something. There's nothing worse than like having to learn about something you don't want to learn about. For me, that 100% disengaged me at high school. Learning about, Shakespeare and English. I didn't really care about Shakespeare, but I had to learn about it. So it's a great course. Getting to talk about societal issues and leadership. All right, making friends. And not often you see that. The assessment was fun to do. Cool. So like being self-directed, challenging parts in the course, and also learning about health during lockdown. So the intention hopefully is that if we ever have another lockdown, all these situations that we're not being able to predict, the students can have success and they can continue on. They're not sitting on the other end of devices needing us to give them content. They can access that because they have the skills and ability to do so. This was a really, really cool one. I quite liked the idea that students thought they would like maybe a couple more smaller projects, perhaps as well, rather than one bigger one. So there's potential there as well for some more changes in the future. So, just in terms of changes and going forward, I might come back to that quickly, and I'll show you guys just the learning resources and that we have and that we run with. So this is like our physical education learning hub page. We have all of our courses on here, so 11, 12, and 13, and then we have resources to that as well. So the resources are not endless. It's just constantly building up and adding resources when we get things. Podcasts, flipped classroom videos, articles from different area, things that students could use and access. And that's constantly building up for students to use. And when we get new stuff, obviously we just add an update and build it. So in terms of like developing students' ability to use a range of texts as well and resources, because those are skills that you need as well in the future, is to be able to go and access resources and to find information. All right. So students can go on, if they're looking at biomechanics, they can click on here, and then from there we've got links to some flipped classroom videos, and then there's a little Google form over here that's associated with that particular flipped classroom video. So if I was wanting to, I could jump onto that response form, and I could see Hayden's responses for that video if I knew that that was what he was doing. So it's also about trying to find out ways to work a little bit smarter as well in terms of how to manage all those different things, which could be quite daunting when you've got 25 different inquiry questions. Our health learning page is pretty much the same as well. So we've got access to all the 3 levels of the health courses as well, and in the same structure as well, access to learning resources where students can go and find stuff that they want to learn about. If there's nothing on there, they can source it elsewhere, share it with us. We can add it to that little page as well and continue building those resources. Any questions on those at all? Cool. Sweet. So as part of like a reflection, stuff like that, what we've talked about as a department and a little bit as well, and we'll be working on, students really enjoyed having the time to work on it, but they also felt that there was too much time working on it, so 3 sessions a week. So they really liked the idea potentially of having 2 sessions a week on their projects, and then a 3rd session looking at something else. For example, for us, it could be the development of our school norms and what does our curiosity norm, the curiosity norm, look like within health. So being critical and potentially bringing out a current health issue and talking a little bit about that and unpacking the underlying concepts in that. Or looking at the Olympic Games and talking a little bit about training for Olympic Games, etc., within PHM Sports Science, and how could you improve your cardiovascular fitness in a short period of time? In terms of, hey, Olympic Games is now going, you have this shorter period of time, how do you improve your cardiovascular fitness quicker? Do you look at altitude training and talking about things like that? So it'll allow us an opportunity to kind of have those really cool learning tangents as well, where you can find stuff that's quite interesting, but also covers more depth as well, and necessarily perhaps something that you might not have been able to cover previously. And then I really love the idea as well. So there's I think it's called Innovation website, and there's a whole bunch of almost unsolvable things around the world that people post up onto this website, and they attach like a monetary, like a prize to it. So one of them that I've seen lately, just as an example, is they're looking for like an instant inflation system for stand-up paddle boards. And so if you can solve that issue and give a proposal for something to actually solve that, to inflate stand-up paddle boards instantly, and it works, you can actually get that amount of money. And so the next thing for me is looking at what are some of those potential issues to do with physical activity, health, physical education. What are those things that we could look at, and proposing a couple of those as projects for students to pick up and run with. Obviously, there wouldn't be any money associated to it, but really cool in terms of ideas. And hey, if it works and there is something similar online, the kids could even put it online and submit it as a proposal in terms of bigger picture. So those are a couple of the potential changes and things that we're considering as part of it. Anytime. All right, so we're pretty much almost out of time. Does anybody have any questions at all or anything? Yes. Yes, so they have the opportunity to work as partners or peers. Like we've got a number of kids that have done similar contexts within our school. Basketball's massive. We had a huge growth in basketball, and so we have quite a few kids that are working on that. So they may work with a partner, and they may have something similar, so they can collaborate and work together 100%. Yeah, so we were fortunate enough to have, I think we had 4 kids working badminton in my last semester, so they could work in pairs or as a group of 4 as well. Yep.
Do the students that come to you, do they already have the skills to manage themselves and know how to work the online platform?
Yes and no. We're fortunate enough that Ormiston Junior College is quite radical with how they approach things. They do heaps of stuff around project-based learning and inquiry projects, so they have some experience in it, but then we have kids from Mission Heights Junior College that are very different. So our feeder schools are completely opposite in terms of how they approach things, and so some kids do have some self-management skills, some don't. And the whole thing about this guided inquiry thing is that, for me, the most of the work for me is at the start of the semester in terms of front-loading and developing those skills. And once they're on that track, then it's a bit more successful. But yeah, to answer your question, yes and no. Some have, some don't. And that's, I guess, typical with feeder schools that you get in. Some kids come with certain skills and others. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
I'm interested in your norms. I've done something like this historically, and it can go two ways with kids all being kind of independent. But what are some of your norms that you've got?
So we've got 8 norms. So we've got Papatanuku, so like valuing the environment. Panga Werewere, so making connections. So students can take what they've learnt and make connections to wider society. Also exploring that, making connections with other learning areas. And so an idea also for that is, giving them a week or 2 within their projects to actually, now you have to do, apply 2 or 3 of your other subjects to that context. We've got care, which talks about like critical curiosity. So care and pukeko, asking questions, being curious.
Cool, so those kinds of things, I wonder if the kids front load those as goals as part of their projects, and then they can intentionally reflect on those as they go through. That might be something that they can consider as they're moving away from that project at the end. How well did I do on that, and what do I need to do next in terms of developing those values? That might be a nice way to sort of tie it into.
Yeah, and I got a great idea from. Yeah, I got a fantastic idea from my workshop yesterday in terms of how we can better do that as well, and what that looks like. And that, I guess, that extra session of the week could be where the kids focus on the development of that particular norm or tikanga, whatever's important within your school
Yeah, or
context.
whatever fits for them within the project that they've chosen as their thing that they want to kind of develop. Yeah.
Yep, 100%. Any other questions at all? Are they mostly active? Yeah. There's so much stuff going on, and like the one thing you kind of also have to be comfortable with, and like, because I've taught at a more traditional school. I taught at Papatoetoe High for almost 6 years, and so like we all have those lessons where some things go wicked, and that was a really great session, and other sessions where it's like, oh, that was a little bit trash and not as good, or and so you will get that here as well, and you'll get some kids who will just have an amazing session, and they'll be real active and doing stuff on their agility and reaction time, and at other times they're just not as good. But I mean, you get that across any sort of approach that you would probably have. I highly doubt you're going to have sessions where everyone is 100% of the time. But yes, because they're having input into what they're doing, and they can research and trial things out, the hope is that they have a bit more engagement because it's more ownership is what they've chosen to do. Rather than saying, all right, you guys are all going to come and now and do the beep test to measure your cardiovascular fitness or something.
And also because it's so dynamic as well, because they might go into a session like if they had a couple students who were defending in football, they went into the session thinking it was all fitness all the time, but then they realised maybe 2 or 3 weeks in that the legs weren't strong enough, and they had to reshape the whole way that they were approaching it. So because it is a dynamic system like that, they don't get stuck down that one path, and so they actually are practical quite a lot of the time. And we're quite lucky we have 90-minute sessions as well, so 1 90 and then 2 60. And so during that 90, you can set up for the first half, planning out exactly what you're going to do and how you're going to do it, and even do the planning for the week in that first half there. And then they get much of the week being able to actually go and experience it.
Any other questions?
That example you put up of the badminton sort of OE, and they've sort of looked at all the sort of key learnings from that particular idea. How much of it is guided on what path they take and how much time they spend on certain concepts? Like, would they, if a kid spend way more time on the skill part of it as opposed to the fitness part of it, is there sort of guidelines on how much time they need to spend on each sort of area of that, you know what I mean?
Yeah, so we have obviously like a couple of weeks of provocations and that front loading, getting the inquiry questions and coming up with that learning list. So we support them a little bit more with that because some kids might struggle with that. And if we have some kids who are really struggling with learning lists, then we can also give them that. Once they're into there, we sort of look at then, all right, so we have, 15 more weeks left in the semester. All right, so, I want you guys for the next 5 weeks, or the next 6 or 7 weeks, I want you guys working on your learning list. And you need to work through all 10 or 15 things over the next 5 or 6 weeks. So then they can go, all right, I've got these 10 things. I've got 5 weeks to do it. I need to cover 2 things each week. So this week I'm going to cover force summation and resistance training. Next week I'm going to look at reaction time and agility. And so then they can have that time frame. Yeah. And they might get to a point where they do agility, and there's so many different aspects of agility and speed and stuff like that, and like the equipment and the resources we have, that they might go, I didn't even get to the power sled yet. I'm going to just kind of push back the stuff a little bit more and spend another session doing some work on the power sled or the parachutes or whatever it is. So you kind of adapt it depending on how much time you have. Yeah. So we had a booking system a while ago, and it just kind of fell flat in its face because for us, we just talk to each other as well. Hey, what are you guys doing? I need the space over here. Cool. We're lucky that we've got one gym, fields and turf and stuff like that, and quite a few courts outside, so we can adapt. What that's going to look like when we hit 1,000 or 3,000, I don't know. I'm a bit worried about that, but I'm pushing for another gym. But we all know money doesn't come that easily. But look, like we just liaise with each other. We're quite fortunate because we have all those different projects. We have some kids up on the fitness centre, and that space doesn't get used 24 hours, you know. So we have some kids there. So you actually just have smaller groups of kids working in different parts. So it's still manageable at this stage. Yep. Yeah. So I mean, like, let's just say if I had my year 11 class and Hayden had his level 2 class on, and they needed the gym for Turbo Touch. You know, if hopefully the weather's all good. If the weather's all good, they can use the fitness centre and the outside space for the courts. I guess if it's absolutely chucking down with rain and that's not a possibility, then we just say, look, let's just adapt. Maybe we're going to bring and do some planning and theory now, and then the next 2 sessions we'll do our practicals. So we just try and roll like that a little bit with that. So I guess it's embracing uncertainty and just kind of having the skills to be able to just adapt and work to those things. Yeah. Anything else? We don't have juniors. Yeah. So we're, yeah. So yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So we're quite fortunate that we obviously 11, 12, and 13. Yeah. Yeah. Anything else? Awesome. Well, it's almost time for lunchtime. So thank you.
Yeah, kia ora, Brendan. Look, I think what you've talked about here today aligns quite closely with some of the changes we're going to have to consider going into the new NCA standards, you know, and the way you're gathering evidence over time, getting kids to take a bit of ownership of their learning. I think it's a great example of how that could be done. So thanks for that. Really appreciate your time.
Great. I'm happy to flick up the 1 or 2 of the kids' Google Sites really quickly, and just for anybody to see. This is one I actually saw just recently. The student's actually going to create an e-portfolio Google Site, but he's also got all his other learning areas on it as well. So he's collecting evidence like that, and this is his work over here. So he was one of the kids that did some work on midfield defending in football. And so he's going to look at obviously speed and agility and come up with examples of what he's done for each of his sessions. So there's examples of how he's applied those biophysical principles. So he's got obviously the whole way through, and then he's got explanations as to why that supported him as well. So it's kind of like learning the theory and being able to show me he knows how to apply it and it knows why it's helped him. So it does kind of fit in a little bit with 2.2 or 2.3, but that's not the explicit focus. Yeah, so just a couple of examples. Sweet. Awesome. Thank you, guys. Cheers, mate.